Hey guys, welcome back to the Tukes and Tires YouTube channel. As always, I'm Zach, and this week on the C1 Chevelle, we're turning this old door skin into a functioning door. Look at that.
Hey, is that Timmy's?
Yeah, because we're in Canada. Alright guys, so you already heard what we're trying to accomplish in today's video on the C1 Chevelle. If you're new here, this is my street legal stock car build. This car lived its whole life as a stock car, and now we're trying to make it streetable. So there's a whole playlist on this thing, so definitely go check that out, all the work we've done so far. But in today's video, we're actually trying to make the doors function because we need them to open because it's a street car. So I'm going to walk you through my game plan on how we're actually going to tackle that. I think we're going to start on the hinges first, so I figured we'll talk about my game plan for that. Lacey, you're just waiting for the heat to start so you can go to sleep. So this car, obviously, they just had the door skin just brazed onto the side of this thing, and when we were doing stuff, I just cut it off so that we could work inside easier. So we are going to have to make some kind of structure in here to actually stiffen up this door skin. So I do have a game plan for that. We got some tubes from Home Depot, so we're going to get to that later on in the video. But for the door hinges, this car still has the 3 bolt holes in here for each hinge. So we're going to try to reuse that. We're actually going to make a plate on there. So from this little sketch I did, you can kind of see what I got going on here. We're going to have the flange that's going to bolt onto the car. We've got a tube that's going to come up for our, I don't know, spacing so that it's actually going to hold the door at the right level out. And then we got a pin kind of thing here that we're going to make up on the lathe so that this plate will actually hook onto there, and that way that we can basically make our own pins that the door is going to pivot on, and then you can make it so that the door will come off. This is more of a drag style door hinge, I guess. If you actually look at a lot of drag cars, they might have something like that so they can take the doors off when they're in the pits or whatever and they're working on their car. But I figured, you know, if it's good enough for that, it's good enough for this. So we're actually going to get Dad making up the pins on the lathe here. Basically, we got this 3/4 inch rod here. We're going to make a little 1/2 inch pin on there. So we got a little plate here with a hole in it so we can test it to make sure it's nice and snug. So I'm going to get him doing that. I'm going to cut him out, and then once we have that, you'll be able to see better what our game plan is for actually going about making these pins. So here we go. Alright, so don't mind the like super messy workbench, but I'm telling you, it's organized. We know where everything is. But these are the 2 pins that we actually made up on the lathe, and you can see that they're at 2 different heights. So this is going to be the upper one, and then this one's going to be the lower one. So we made this one a little bit longer, so when you actually go to actually put the door on, that you can hook it on the bottom one first, and then get the top one in place, and you can see that this 1/2 inch thing is going to pivot on there like that. So then I got some of this tube. I just bought this stuff at Home Depot because it's a pretty thick wall and it's good enough for what we're doing. So then I'm going to fish mount that around this. We're actually going to get that welded onto each pin. So you can see I left it up just a little bit so that way that when we actually make a pin, that this will pivot over nicely. That way I left these long so that way I can trim them to wherever I want to. I still have to make up the other plate yet. That's going to go onto the car. So I'm going to do that, get those welded up, and then we'll see about where I have to do my measurements of how far those actually have to stick off of the car. So, you know, it's going to be kind of a guessing game, but I'm going to get making up those pins and the plates that are actually going to bolt onto the car, and then we'll come back to what I got figured out. So, Lacey, you're not sleeping. Alright guys, so you saw me make up the majority of this main portion of the hinge. There's some things I didn't show making just because they were, you know, kind of simple. So for the main plate, I just made up a template, and you can see that I bolted those actually to the spot where the original hinge would have been bolted to the car. You saw me weld up these two pins together just because that pipe was actually long enough to make both of them. So we just have them tacked in right now, but I was kind of testing the skin on here with Dad. He was holding it, but this thing we actually made here is pretty well perfect for like where the hinge would rotate. And if you actually look at these, they're pretty well in line. I mean, as good as I could get them with my eye. I'm not going to get too crazy with them because it's like, you know, it's a crappy door at the end of the day. So you can see that this is pretty well in line there. And if we actually had something that would be like the skin, kind of our gap, it does rotate in. We can always move the fender forward to give us a little bit more room, but that's working out really awesome right now. So we're actually going to move on to trying to make the structure inside the door. So I had this on there, I had Dad hold it, and we actually just marked some lines where like kind of where the hinges are. So you can see we've got a Sharpie mark here and one there just to tell us, you know, we can't go any further this way. And then I did the same thing on the back. So basically what I got to do now is we're going to get some pipe, we're going to start cutting them, I'm going to try to curve them to the door skin to get them as close as possible. And then we can do bars to join them that way. In the back, I am going to do an extra bar kind of going here, just so we have a more beefier spot to put the hinge kind of section thing on there. But we're going to get bending up some bars, and then we'll come back to once we have this a little bit more situated. So it's looking pretty sweet so far. Alright guys, so you actually saw us bend up all those pipes. Dad gave me a hand with that, so that was super cool. And you actually see me get this kind of welded together. Off camera, I actually bent up one more pipe and got it welded onto this framework. But this is kind of what we came up with for this thing. The skin was welded onto the car before, so it was kind of bent and dinged up, so actually trying to get it to a point where it's going to fit on there pretty well was a little bit of a task, but I think it's looking pretty good for what it is. I do actually have it screwed in from the other side, so I think I'm going to maybe try to rivet it with some steel rivets from the other side just so that maybe they'll rust eventually so it looks kind of old. And then maybe I'm going to add some more steel in here, but I'll show you what we got going on here. So this front section is actually going to be for the other half of the hinge to be able to go onto, so we have a lot of meat there. And I was keeping in mind that we needed room for the latch. So we're actually going to be doing this backwards, where the pin is going to be on the door and the latch is actually going to be in the car. So I was just making sure I had enough room there with my Sharpie marks I put in here. So that looks like it's going to work out. I think I'm going to end up adding a wide piece of steel here in the bottom to just stiffen up the bottom. And then I think I'm going to put a thicker piece up top in there, so if you do ever want to leave out the window kind of like a stock car, that it should be able to handle your weight, and all this hinge system should be beefy enough to do that. I'm hoping so. We're going to find out. But basically what I'm going to do over here, I think I'm going to get the fender off just so that I can see in here a little bit better. I do know where the door needs to be placed, just because I've had it on and off a couple times, checking it out, making sure that all my pipes were going to fit with this roll cage and stuff like that. So we'll get that off so that I can actually see what we need to make up for the other portion of that hinge. I'll probably come back to once I have it a little more situated, probably with those pieces, just because they're just going to be angle irons with holes in them. and then we'll see if the door's actually gonna work. Lacey, you gonna help out? Yeah, probably not. Here we go. Alright guys, so we got those angle irons all made up and I actually have them welded in there, so we'll show you what's going on here. So you can see the top one looks like this, it's got a notch, and the bottom one is just straight. So the reason for this notch here is that we're actually going to do a tab that's going to be welded to this tube. So it's actually going to hook over top of the angle iron, so when we're driving this thing down the road that the door can't bounce off, but when you would swing the door open, the little tab here would be kind of in this notch and you should be able to lift the door off. So I'm going to set you guys up here on this tripod and we're going to show you the door actually operating for the first time. So we just come here, grab the door. Oh, look at that. That is super cool. Man, I couldn't be happier on how this turned out. I mean, I think the door might need a little bit of adjustment, but, you know, that is so cool that these were skins and they actually operate now. So, like, that is so cool. So, to show you how the door comes off, you would open it up, obviously, past where your little hook would be. You come here and you could grab the door, just give it a wiggle, door comes off. And then with that longer pin on the bottom, we're able to come in here and actually get the bottom one hooked on first, if I can find the hole, right there, get the top one, and it drops back in place. I mean, that is so cool. I think I'm going to want it just a little bit higher here in the back, but with the adjustment that we're still using the factory bolt location, I should be able to just kind of tweak that to where I want it. I might have to cut this out just a little bit to actually make it clearance, but I'm going to get the fender back on to make sure that that fits, and then we'll get you guys in here so you can kind of see what this all looks like, how it's operating and stuff, and then we'll move on to actually putting a latch onto this thing, but that is super cool. The C1 Chevelle has an operating door. Alright, so we got the fender back on, so I figured we'd get you in here first so you can see kind of everything all on the inside, so you can see all the bracing in there. It's looking pretty sweet. Like I said, I still got to do some adjustment on this door just to get it, you know, pretty perfect, but now we're going to be moving on to the latch. So this is the stuff that I bought. I bought a whole kit, came in a box like that, so it came with like the striker, this whole adjustment plate thing, and then this bare latch. We're going to be kind of doing it backwards on this thing, where the pin is actually going to be on the door, and then the actual latch portion is going to be over here. Just because of how this door is, you wouldn't really be able to get in there and pull on this thing. So what we're going to end up doing is this latch is going to go like this. So this is actually, I think, supposed to be the passenger side, and then it's going to go somewhere in here. Sorry, I wasn't showing very well, but in here somewhere. So what we got to do is we got to make a brace off of the roll cage tubing to actually hold this thing, and then I'll probably end up cutting a slot in the skin for the pin to actually clear through, and then probably once we got this a little more situated and figured out, I'll probably come back to kind of the pieces we got to actually make this work. So I'm going to start cutting up this tube here that was left over from when we did the front end stuff, and then, you know, see if we can actually make this door latch. So here we go. Alright guys, so I spent a couple hours on this thing. It's pretty rough still, so I'm going to show you what we got so far, and then I got a little bit of a better game plan now, so we're going to refine it, but you can see right now the door's actually latched and it's closed, and then if I come in here, I should be able to find the latch, and then the door will pop open. You can see that this is what we got going on for this pin side. I'm going to tidy this up a little bit. I might end up adding another tube in here to actually match the other side and make it look a little more proper. This other side over here, you can see I just have a bar actually vice grip to this whole kind of striker plate thing. I'm going to add a tube in here, but just from this back brace here, we're going to add a tube and actually a stronger plate onto this front plate. But this is what it's looking like. You know, this is pretty rough, so I'm going to try to, you know, figure it out just a little bit better and get this welded in and all tidied up so it looks like it's meant to be there. But, you know, proof of concept actually works, so I'm pretty happy with that. So we'll probably come back to once I actually have this side a little bit more figured out, maybe a tube added in here, and then we're gonna call that good. But that's, you know, that's pretty wicked. Lacey, you're gonna go to sleep, aren't you? Yeah. Proof that Lacey is just always sleeping. But we got this door pretty much tidied up, so I'll show it to you guys, get it popped open here. So you can see on this side here, on the door side with this pin, I just kind of tidied it up just a little bit so it actually kind of followed the angle. You know, it's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. And then I also added this tube in here to kind of match the front one. It is a smaller tube, but it's going to make this pin really nice and strong. But all the work actually went into this other side here. So you can see, just to start us off, you can see it actually it's looking kind of like an original door jamb kind of thing. But I added this big tube in here that actually goes to the roll cage. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's actually like a big plate that actually backs the back of this latch. We left the front portion of it just because it had the hole cut into it and everything, and it actually fit really well in there. And then, you know, we just got it all welded together. But this thing is like super beefy now, and it can be like actually handled being closed and stuff like that. So that's super cool. I'm pretty happy on how everything turned out on this door. But I actually think that's going to do it for now on this video. I do have to start the other door, but I'm not going to bore you guys with that because it's just going to be the exact same process as what we did on this door. But I just got to do it on the other side. But I can't believe how this thing turned out. It is super cool. I'm really happy on how it actually opens and closes and that you can take it off. Probably in another video, we're going to figure out the actual handle for actually opening it. I have an idea for that, but you'll catch that in another video later on when we actually figure that out. But I don't know what we got planned for the next video on this thing. Who knows? We might be, you know, I got to turn it around, so we might be doing some stuff on the back of the car. We might maybe try to fit some windows into this thing. I have no idea, but you guys will just have to stick around till next time and see what we come up to. But thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for subscribing. And as always, don't forget to salute the beaver. We'll catch you next time. Friggin' Lacey, just snoozing.